Hola everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Yvonne. I'm a public speaking creative, and across all platforms on Chats with Yvonne, I hope you love the art of public speaking. In today's video, we're going to go ahead and talk about how to use note cards while you're up on stage. But before we get into that, I do want to do a little bit of a plug. I am the host of two podcasts, the Chats with Yvonne podcast, where I talk about public speaking, I share my journey, some tips, and also invite guests to share their journey, all in hopes of helping you love the art of public speaking, connect with it in a different way, reflect, connect, and share. As you all know, if you watch one of my latest videos, that is my framework for understanding your relationship with public speaking. The second podcast is the Ponte Perra Affirmations podcast. I talk a lot about how affirmations are really and have been really important in my public speaking journey, and in that reflect piece, affirmations play a huge part in how I show up on stage and how I continue to want to grow as a speaker. So check those two out if you haven't had a chance. I'll link all of my socials down below as well. And of course, remember that maybe after this video, once you watch it, remember to subscribe if you want to support my channel. Like this video if you like this kind of content, and speak your mind in the comments. Let me know what you think. Have you used note cards? What do you think about my tips? And let's talk about it. First, I'll go over the pros and cons of using note cards while you're up on stage presenting, and then I'll actually go into a bit of a step-by-step on how to create your note cards. Empezamos with the pros or the cons? You know what? Let's start with the cons. These are not all of the cons. These are not all of the pros. These are just some things that I thought up of and that I think are very common when we do use note cards. So let's get right into it. But of course, if you have a differing opinion, if you think there's other pros and other cons to using note cards, please feel free to speak your minds in the comments and let me know what you think about this. The first one is you can lose your place. It's that simple as that. How many times have you been shuffling, or maybe you haven't, right? But it can be the case that you are using note cards, and because they're written in paper, I don't necessarily like bringing my phone up all of the time, but if it's the only thing you have, great. But you can lose your place, right? So especially if you have note cards, you're shuffling the cards, you're moving as you go, but let's say you forget to switch to the next card, you may want to look down to look at what your next point is, and then you don't know where you are. So that is a con, and it can happen live on stage, and it can end up making you a little bit more nervous than you initially were. There is a potential of relying on them a little too much. And what I mean by that is that you're constantly looking down at them, which therefore means you're not having eye contact with your audience, and that can dilute the experience not only for yourself but for your audience. And what I mean by dilute the experience is you're not connecting with people live. Part of the beauty of public speaking is realizing how the words that you're saying are impacting your audience live. And that goes right into the next con, right? That goes right into the next con of using note cards. This potential to lose connection with your audience because you are so focused on getting it right. This is kind of related to the first one, but if somehow you lose your place in the shuffle of your note cards, it can be hard to recover from that. Meaning, if you practiced relying solely on those note cards and relying on the fact that you would have them up on stage, when you go up there and something somehow goes wrong, or you drop them on the floor, whatever it is, it can be hard to recover from that. Not only because you were depending on them for your next point, but also because you start to feel really nervous. I mean, imagine how it feels like when tech goes wrong during a live presentation, right? Tech is something you can't really control sometimes, as many times as you practice it, but even that throws you off a little bit. So think about that when considering whether you want to use note cards. And here's something that I've actually done before during the first couple presentations that I gave. I used note cards, and I remember one of the best practices, right, is, and everyone tells you this, I'm going to tell you this too, is to write bullet points. Write bullet points of what you want to say versus word by word. Don't write your script on a note card. Like, that's not ideal. But one of the cons could be that you end up writing too little on the note card. You're so focused on only writing the important parts that you forget to add some color to it. Or you yourself are so nervous and you're relying on your note card so much that you just say what's on the note card and forget to add the you-ness to it. And the last con, I promise, let's say you're holding your note cards. These are your note cards, right? What are they doing? They are occupying both of your hands. Let's say you have one hand open. Okay, there's one hand that can move, but maybe that one's holding a mic. These days, maybe you don't have to hold a mic. You'll have a little microphone right here. Okay, great. Estás así. Pero you don't have this other hand to move, right? Like, it limits the way that you're able to use your body to communicate with your audience. Even not only just your hand movements, but also the way you move across stage. I find that when we're really focused on saying what's on our note cards or following the outline of what we've written out, it can limit the way that we move across the stage and therefore limit the connection that we have with our audience. Now let's move on to pros, because there are a lot of them too. Note cards can make you feel more secure. I mean, there's no better security than feeling like if I forget what I need to say, or if for some reason I'm about to skip over that really important point, I have it written down. I can reference it. They can be helpful if you didn't have a ton of time to prepare. But I would argue that even the writing of the note cards is preparation itself, and you're committing what you're writing down to memory. Note cards can help you keep track of time. Let's say you only have 5 minutes up on that stage, and in those 5 minutes, you need to make sure that you hit the points that you want to hit. Note cards are a really good way of keeping track of yourself. Okay, I'm talking about this. If you practice with the note cards, which I think is a really important thing to do, you'll know, okay, by minute 2, I should be at this point, and you can glance over at your note cards every once in a while, and that helps you keep track of time when there isn't necessarily a clock around or someone timekeeping for you. And I know I listed this one as a con, but it could very well be a pro. Because you're only using keywords in your note cards, it actually gives you more time to connect with your audience. When you look down at your note card and you say, okay, I have to talk about messaging, or I have to talk about introverts. Okay, and you know what you want to say about those things, they're listed there. It gives you more an opportunity to say, I know that I, at the very least, have hit the message of what I wanted to say. Now I can expand on it. I can add a story element to it. I can look up from my note card and connect with my audience. And here's the last one, and one that I think is really important, is that to me, note cards have the ability of leveling out the playing field. And here's what I mean by that. There are a ton of people who know their content. The first couple of times that I gave keynote presentations, I didn't know what I was doing, and I relied heavily on my note cards. And it wasn't because I didn't know what to say. It wasn't because I didn't thoroughly know my content. It was actually because I was just so nervous about the opportunity to take on a stage where I hadn't seen people like me take on a stage before. And I truly think that note cards have the ability of giving an opportunity and creating space for people that feel really nervous, that get terrible anxiety about going up on stage, and having and feeling secure with note cards and knowing that, okay, I have my note cards up here with me. That is one layer of comfort. That is one way that I will feel comfortable and that I will feel confident. And being true to who I am, public speaking is for everybody. And so we have to be accommodating. And I want everybody to have the opportunity to feel their best while they're up on stage. If that means using note cards, that's what we're going to do. So let's dive into how to actually create your note cards and make them as efficient as possible while you're up on stage. Number 1, I'm going to say limit the amount, the number of note cards that you have on stage with you. Whether you're doing a 15-minute presentation or an hour-long presentation. Number 2, write so that you can see. Even if you have 20/20 vision, let me tell you something. When you're up on stage, you're not gonna be able to see. And I say this from experience too. I thought that writing super small on the note card was helpful because it meant, okay, if I only have 10 note cards up there with me, I can write really small and then I'll be able to add more information to it. But that can confuse you. So when you're up on stage, you want to be able to see it. So I would create your note card, and I'll show you an example of one towards the end of the video. I'll insert a screenshot of one that I created to show as an example. But if you have a note card, you want to create a header for it and then add your bullets to it so that you know what the main idea is, and you have the 2 to 3 bullets that you want to make sure to touch on based on that header. Now, If you're like me, you can probably color code as well, be a little extra with it. Bold, color code, make them different colors, but colors that you can actually see, letters that you can actually see when you're on stage. Number 3, don't read off of your cards. They should only serve as a prompt. You don't want to write exactly what you want to say on here because that will make you go back and forth. This is what you look like. And that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But again, one of the cons we listed is this disconnect with the audience. If you are reading, if you're worried about saying things exactly the way that they show up on your note cards, you're not going to have as much fun and as much of a connection and engagement with your audience. So your note cards should only have ideas, things and words that prompt your message. Number 4, practice with your note cards so that you don't have to rely on them. I sort of think about this like when we were taking exams and the teacher said, okay, you get a cheat sheet. And I wrote every single thing down that I could on that cheat sheet, front and back. And then when I got to the test, I ended up not even using them. One, partly because the questions that were on the test probably didn't match what I had on my cheat sheet. But then the other reason is because without even realizing, I was studying it. And so the questions that would have required my cheat sheet, I already knew. Similar to your note cards, when you are practicing for your speech, if you're going to have note cards, you want to practice that. And what I mean by that is literally go through your entire presentation, practice when you'll look down, practice when you'll look back up, practice what each phrase and keyword means to you and how you're going to elaborate, how you're going to add a story around it. It is super important to practice with your note cards because if you think you write the note cards and you can just show up the day of and just are like, I can rely on my note cards wholeheartedly, then that is what can lead to some of the cons that I shared prior to this. Number 5, use different colored ones. This is sort of a personal thing, but I like the multicolored note cards. And because, again, we only want to have about 7-10 note cards up there. And remember, tip number 2 was all around creating headers and maybe color coding the actual content on the note card. Well, what if you are on stage and for some reason they get mixed up? At least you know I have a yellow, pink, blue. So it helps you keep track of the order as well. If you are a business owner, if you have a podcast, if you're a speaker and you have a brand, you could even add your sticker to it. You could create some cool note cards on Canva that are very much you. Number 6 is to hold your cards naturally and be really aware of what other things you'll have to hold. And what I mean by that is, if you have to hold a mic in your hand, you're only going to have one other hand for your note cards, and it may limit your movement. Or know that if you are, this is the mic, let's say, if you are moving around, if you are moving this hand around, people are going to also see the note cards. So that's something to be really aware of. It's not a good or a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. In one of my keynote presentations, and I think it's my very first one, I'll show you, I had a mini mic here and I was holding my cards like this. I was extremely nervous, so having my note cards was really helpful. But I held them with both hands. Now, if I had to use note cards, I probably have really small ones. I'd hold them like this and be really aware, of when I had them. I might even have pockets in case I want to get rid of them for a little bit and I feel confident. I find that when you use note cards on stage, they're not only helpful to keep yourself accountable for whatever it is that you want to say and on track, but they help you with your confidence. And I will also say that confidence on stage gradually grows. Your introduction may be a little bit shaky because you're nervous. Once you get into the zone, you just start to feel a little less nervous. You're like, okay, I'm doing this. Ya estoy aquí arriba, lo que pase, pasa. You may even just get rid of them. I'm like, okay, I can stop holding them now. I know what I need to talk about. Up next, I want to show you how I actually create a note card. And I'm going to base it off of a workshop that I recently gave, and it was called Public Speaking for Introverts. So we're going to create a note card using some of the tips that I shared, and I'll walk you through it. All right, so when looking at this example, in this part of my outline, I'm going to be talking about introvert characteristics. And I didn't note this during my tips, but something that you can do and write down in your note card are statistics or facts. If you want to make sure that you say them correctly, you can totally write those things down, and just to make sure you have the facts straight. So what I did here is I knew that I wanted to start with the facts, and that is that 30 to 50% of the population are introverts. That gives my audience a clue and context for what I'm about to say. And my claim is that introverts make great public speakers. So after the entirety of what I go through, I want people to understand how introverts are actually great public speakers. Again, this is only one part of the larger presentation, but I wanted to show you how I organized this note card. Then I'm going to pick out 3 characteristics of introverts. So I'm going to choose the 3 that I want to highlight. And in particular, I'm highlighting them because I want people to understand how those characteristics make you a great public speaker. What I did here in my note card is I bolded the characteristic, and then underneath it, I added as a speaker with a little arrow, and I'll walk through preparation and right before going on stage. And I'll share techniques for preparing and going up on stage. I didn't finish it up here, perdónme por eso. And then think before you speak. As a speaker, again, same arrow. I listen first. Words are deliberate. So as you can see, my outline here is bolding the main statement, main characteristic that I want to show and share. And then as a speaker, right? And followed by the arrow. They all sort of follow the same format, and that typically helps me maintain an understanding of what I want to say and a clear pattern for what's coming up next. You can decide to do it this same way, creating indents, and it might even be better for you to type it out, but these things that are on here don't have to make sense to anybody else but yourself. So if you have no idea what I'm saying when I say walk through preparation, I know. And the important thing about note cards is that they should be clues for you, not for anybody else, but you. So it'll be really important to practice this note card right before going up on stage or presenting so that I'm familiar with the language that I wrote down. And that was it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate the time that you've spent with me today. To get closer to loving the art of public speaking, remember to like this video. If you liked this video, lets me know that you like this kind of content. Remember to speak your mind in the comments. I have options below for what the next video should be, so let me know. Do you want A, B, or C? And remember, if you'd like to, subscribe and support my channel. The last thing that I'll say is check out the bio and the description for all the good stuff. I have a lot of stuff and information there too, so let me know what you think. Check out my stuff. And reach out to me if you have absolutely any questions around public speaking. I am more than happy to help you out and to even just share my experience. If you want to be a guest on my podcast episode, Chats with Yvonne, please reach out to me. There is a Google submission form that you can fill out, and I will reach out to you as soon as I can. Enjoy your cafecito donde quiera que estén, or tea, or water, whatever you're drinking, and I'll see you here again next time. Adios, everybody.